A fever is an immune response. Just like inflammation is an immune response, too much can be a problem, but within reason, it's a physiological, normal bodily process that has some really vital purposes. A fever is, of course, when our body temperature, our thermostat goes up a notch. The reason our body does it is because when our body temperature is higher, the immune system is basically better able to fight off infections. It's more responsive to threats. And also we release certain chemicals which are really good for our immune system in a fever. So for example, there's a chemical, a little protein that we release when we're fighting a viral infection, which are called interferons. Now, interferons are very good because they interfere, hence the name, with viral replication. And we increase the activity of interferons when we have a fever. So it's really important that we allow this normal bodily process to take place, but that, of course, we watch carefully, especially with kids, when their body isn't quite as good at regulating body temperature.
Welcome to The Wellness Way with me, Philly J. Lay, a layperson's guide to your natural health systems, your very own NHS. Hello, lovely people, and welcome to another episode of The Wellness Way. And today's guest is a man who is a mine of information. He is an experienced and respected nutritional therapist. He's a naturopath and he's an educator. And he is head of education at the College of Naturopathic Medicine, CNM, which I'm a massive fan of that college and I'm forever popping in and out for lectures. So without any ado, can I introduce you to Mr. Bobby Qureshi. Bobby, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
No problem. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me, Philly.
Right. We're going to have an in-depth conversation today about the immune system and autoimmune disease and their relationship to each other. But let's start with the immune system. What is the immune system?
The immune system is such a crucial system in the body. I mean, never has it been so important as it is today. This is a system that's there to provide us with defense, there to provide us with protection against the things in the world around us. This is a system that, when working well, keeps us away from infectious diseases that might become a real problem. The immune system's job is not to stop us from getting every illness that's known on the planet. That's the first thing I want to be really clear on. It's to help our body overcome an illness and to overcome it well. And in fact, a healthy immune system really relies on exposure. Whenever I teach at CNM, whenever I'm talking about the immune system, I always say that, if we're learning to drive a car, we learn how to drive through that experience, through that practice. And ultimately, that's what happens with our immune system. For it to work well, we need to be exposed to all of these different organisms out there. So primarily, it's to stop us from getting infections, or at least to stop those infections sort of getting deeper into the body. So, we may get a cold or we may get the flu, and that's a fairly superficial infection. It affects the upper respiratory tract. Maybe it affects muscles, maybe we have some achy joints, we have a bit of a fever, but we're not going into sepsis, a blood infection, or we're not going into organ failure, because ultimately our immune system has stopped that illness from progressing further. The other key side of the immune system that we don't often talk about as much is ensuring that our immune system appropriately identifies a target. And what I mean by that is that the immune system should be well trained so that it identifies cells in the body that shouldn't be there, that are unhealthy cells. That may be a foreign bacteria or a virus that maybe the body doesn't really want at that time. But that does also include abnormal cells that the body has unfortunately made. So things like cancer cells. The immune system has this ability to kind of surveil what's going on, to police the body in a way. So it's important that we have that function of tumor surveillance at the same time. So if our immune system spots some cells that look abnormal and they look perhaps even cancerous, theoretically, the immune system should be able to identify that and target that. So the question always then becomes, well, why do people get illnesses associated with a weak immune system? Why is the immune system weak? Why is it that body has allowed a cancerous growth to form, for example? Those are the sorts of questions that, in naturopathic medicine, we really want to prioritize. So I know I've kind of branched out there in that introduction, but I think it's important to set the scene a little bit there.
Sorry to interrupt this podcast. Why don't you come and sign up to my newsletter at phillyjlay.com, where we can keep connected and we can talk about lots of things going on in the world. You will also get my free manifestation meditation so you can become a shit-hot manifester too. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. And turn your notifications on so you never miss an episode. Thank you. I think so as well. But there are 3 layers, I believe, to the immune system. Could you talk us through those layers so that we've actually got it broken down and we know what we're doing and what our body's doing, more importantly?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is very visual. So we've got 3 layers of defense, a bit like if, you had a city that you were trying to protect against some foreign invaders. You would want to build layers of defense. You wouldn't just build a wall and hope for the best. You would have, an army, you'd have soldiers or whatever that might be. So in terms of the 3 lines of defense in the immune system, the first bit is the bit that we can see. So this is primarily our skin. Our skin is the biggest organ in the body, and it's there to provide a physical barrier against things that are unwanted, things that we don't really want. We are constantly exposed to unwanted substances that will land on our skin and they won't get any further, because our skin is packed with cells that are all tightly sort of knitted together. So there's basically no gap at all. I would liken it a little bit to a brick wall. If you think you've got bricks and the cement, there's not really much of a way through there. So the skin is really the most important part of that first line of defense. If we then go internally, so if we sort of look inside our mouth, for example, we then have that mucousy coating, which we call our mucous membranes. And our mucous membranes are there to provide sort of an internal barrier. So, for example, if we swallow food or we swallow bacteria that we maybe don't want, we have a tube that's lined with this mucous membrane that also provides a physical barrier. So it's almost sort of an internal continuation of the skin. But the most important thing really is that the first line of defense is about a physical barrier against unwanted substances. The other part of that first line of defense is also very basic responses, things like vomiting. We vomit because our body has identified there's something we don't want in our gut and we need to expel it quickly. So it's a very basic sort of primal almost setup that we have there. The second line of defense is where we've sort of broken past that physical barrier a little bit and we're maybe trying to cause a little bit more havoc. So from the perspective of, let's just say, a virus that's trying to, get inside your body and colonize and replicate, we have more specialized cells now that come into play. So these are a little bit like soldiers or police officers that patrol the body, and they're looking for things that really are not wanted. Now, this is quite a general sort of immune defense. So this is like a typical police officer that's out on the streets. If that police officer spots a crime, they will go and deal with that crime. It doesn't matter whether it's somebody having their house burgled or somebody being attacked physically, whatever it might be. These are cells that will look for anything that looks abnormal, that's out of place, and it will hopefully go in and attack. So a very simple example of this would be a cell called natural killer cells. So as per the name, natural killer cells, these are little ninjas that go around and they stab cells that they don't like and they rupture. So natural killer cells are an amazing part of that second line of defense. Anything that they see that they don't like, they're there to get rid of it. We then need a more advanced part of our immune system, though, which is what we call the third line of defense. This is where, if that organism has had a little bit more success than we had hoped, and it's sort of broken beyond that second line of defense or is really growing in size, then the third line of defense starts to get involved. This is where we go into very specific targeted immune responses. So this is a little bit like, having MI5 or the FBI get involved. MI5 are not interested in a little robbery that happened in a shop down on the high street, but they are interested in a bigger threat posed to an area. So that's what the third line of defense is all about. And the third line of defense, therefore, is really about identifying a specific target and launching a specific attack against it. So this is where we bring in the good old lymphocytes. So listeners, you may have heard of the T lymphocytes and the B lymphocytes, but this is the third line of defense. So that's a bit of a breakdown for you there.
That is just an amazing description of it. That's so clear and so simple. Thank you, Bobby. I want to come back to the skin first, though, because as you said, the skin is the largest organ of the body. And you're saying it's like a wall, but things do seep through our skin. So what are your thoughts there with using kind of toxic body creams full of chemicals, all the nasties, the shampoos, all the parabens, everything we put on the body? Is that a good idea, Bobby?
Definitely not. This is a selective barrier. This is not a perfect barrier that will stop everything getting through. It does depend on what the substance is as to how likely it is to be absorbed through the skin. So, for example, essential oils, because they are fat-based, they are absorbed through the skin very easily because cells in our body are basically lined with fatty acids. So anything that's fat-based will go through very easily because fat likes fat. But what fats don't like is water. So things that are more water-based, if you put a drop of water on your skin, you're not going to watch that dissolve and sort of seep straight into the deeper layers. That's not really how it works. Whereas with an essential oil, you basically would. So yeah, you do absorb a lot of what you put on your skin if it's got the right sort of chemical makeup in that sort of compound, or in that formula. So yes, if you're thinking about spraying on some antiperspirant packed with aluminium under your arms, where, by the way, under your arms there is a lot of sweat glands, so that's an easy access into the body. Then yeah, that sort of stuff will absolutely go through to the skin. Through the skin and into the body. You absolutely are right as well. Conventional creams, cleaning products, all of those sorts of things, if you're getting them on your hands and on your skin, they can be absorbed. And luckily, we have an amazing organ in the liver to help deal with a lot of that. But, when we're overloading our liver with so many toxins and medications and toxins from bacteria in an abnormally sort of balanced gut, that's a lot for the liver to do. So the last thing we want to be doing is putting more toxins into the body. So yeah, we need to be really careful with what we're putting on our skin because the absorption of some things in particular is considerably high.
Very, very true. And why I don't use perfume anymore. Do you know, I stopped using perfume when I became pregnant, and I just knew in my heart of hearts that it was bad for the baby. I don't know why. I just kind of thought, oh, I don't want that. And I stopped, but I use essential oils, which I love. So we have these incredible things called the immune system, and we are a mean machine, aren't we? It's quite extraordinary. And you spoke there about, kind of all the different defenses we have and how it's important to have something kind of, to put them to work. They need to learn to identify what's going on. So let's talk about, and I've talked about it before on the podcast, but let's run through germ terrain theory, because for me, this is the cornerstone of certainly what's happened in the last 3 years could never have happened if people understood terrain. So can you run us through it, please?
Sure. And I love talking about this. At CNM, this is one of the key sort of concepts that we teach at the start of all of our courses, because you need to understand this if you're going to understand a holistic and naturopathic approach to the immune system. What the difference is here, we've got the germ theory and the terrain theory. The germ theory is very much this idea that the germ or the microbe is responsible for disease. So, I definitely was exposed to this growing up. I was in a family where it was always blamed on the bacteria. It was always the virus. It was always the fungus. It was always the parasite that was the problem. it was never the environment that may have allowed that to become an issue. And that's the difference between the germ theory, which many of you will know Louis Pasteur, who famously sort of produced this theory. And then we've got the terrain theory, which is very much saying, well, it's not the organism that matters, it's the environment in which it's living. It's, is it in an environment where that body is allowing it to become a problem? So, are we in a body that has a weak immune system, that has a lot of toxicity that's sort of overflowing? Or are we in a healthy body that's eating well, that's breathing fresh air, that's well hydrated, that's moving? It's really about that individuality. And that really is a real kind of key pillar of naturopathic medicine. It is actually one of the key principles, naturopathic principles, that we focus on everybody as an individual. So what we're not so much interested in is the germ or the microbe. We're interested in the person. So, a lot of people will say to me, "Oh, Bobby, you probably don't want to see us today because we've got colds." I'll go, absolutely not. I want to see you. It's a good little bit of training for my immune system. And it's a good test for my immune system to see how it gets on against, some exposure to these different organisms. So unfortunately, we have in the last few years seen the germ theory sort of come back into fashion, if you like, because of course we've had COVID, where it's all about COVID and it's never about the person. But obviously what really we should all be thinking about is, who is that person? How can we support their immune system and their body to provide defense against that organism? And that's really the key difference, rather than sort of scaring the life out of everybody about what this one virus may do, or this one bacteria may do, or this fungus may do. We really should be saying, well, how can we focus positively on creating an environment where that organism is unlikely to become a problem?
And you mentioned Louis Pasteur there, who obviously was the complete and utter prat that pasteurized milk and dairy and everything and took all the goodness out of it. But there was another chap at the same time. There were two theorists, and we have to say they're theorists. There was another chap touting his theory. So you talk us through that one,
yeah,
to him and his work, and why he was kind of rebuffed, because he was rebuffed, wasn't he?
Absolutely. This is Antoine Béchamp, who was a biologist who had sort of done his own research and actually presented his research to Louis Pasteur. And famously, supposedly at least, on Louis Pasteur's deathbed, he said that Béchamp was right, that the terrain is everything and the germ is nothing. So that's quite a famous sort of quote that's come out from that. So it does go to show. And, these were, at one particular time, these were two very polarizing figures in their approach who were really saying completely different things. And I find it interesting that, still, 150 or so years on, don't quote me on the exact date on that one, but 150-ish years on, it's almost like we're still dealing with the same argument, which is, we've got one group of people arguing that it's all about the germ and the rest of us arguing that it's about the terrain. Which is a real shame that we're still having to have this argument, because the reality is we know that, one person with a cold may go into a room with 100 people and have lots of exposure, but not everybody's going to get a cold, which factors in that individual sort of robustness and that terrain. That's really what it comes down to, the terrain. What are we bathing this body in? And I know we're going to talk a little bit later about autoimmune disease, so I won't mention this too much now, but just very briefly, autoimmunity is where the immune system gets mistaken and it starts attacking the body. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, it's all genetic. And there are a lot of genes that increase the risk, but even there, it's about the terrain, it's about the environment. And I often will use the quote around this, which is that whilst genes may load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. And by environment, we mean terrain. We can pretty much say the same thing about our general immune robustness. If we may inherit some good genes that suggest that we have a good immune system, but ultimately, if we eat junk food and we don't look after ourselves, then you may as well pull the trigger.
Very, very true. And actually, our genes make up 1% of our illnesses. And we have epigenetics, and I've talked about it much on the show. And it's really important to understand that the terrain is what's going to set that. It is the environment. And we have, as I said, these mean machines that can turn it around when we know what to do with them. And so I'm going to bring you on a little bit quicker than planned onto autoimmunity, because I find this topic absolutely extraordinary. I've suffered from so many autoimmune diseases in my life. And actually, I've just written, because I'm writing another book at the moment, I've just written something that happened to me. When my husband and I separated, and we were going to a friend's house for Christmas, and first of all, he pulled out, and it was a bit tense, and then I did. And then the host said, actually, you can't come, Philly, because you won't eat the meat, you won't eat gluten, you won't eat soy, you won't eat sugar, you won't eat... I'm going to cook you salmon. And I went, oh, no, it's the most toxic food on the planet. I'm not eating farm salmon. But I meditated that morning, and I just meditated that I could eat anything. And I rocked up and took a cake, and my children were going, oh, for God's sake, you're going to vomit. And I go, it's fine. I've meditated, and I was absolutely fine. So we talk a lot about all the mechanisms that you can use to build this immune system, but we have the mind as well, and it is quite extraordinary. But the body does turn on itself. Can you explain why the body turns on itself? What's going on here? How this happens?
Yeah, it's a great question. And just to say, now we know of over 100 autoimmune conditions, specific autoimmune conditions, and there will obviously be a lot more that we still don't know about. And the prevalence of autoimmune conditions has just increased and increased and increased. I would say that probably 1 in 2 of my patients have an autoimmune disease, at least one. That's how prevalent we're talking now. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So this is an area that, most practitioners in this space will be working with a lot. I am constantly working to balance the immune system because of an autoimmune disease. But you've asked the right question, which is always the question we ask in naturopathy, which is why? Why is it happening? So there certainly isn't one reason for getting an autoimmune disease. There are multiple factors that will increase your risk. Whilst there may be some genetic backbone to it, as we've just discussed, the environment pulls the trigger, which comes on to everything from sort of diet, lifestyle, general toxicity, environment, and so on. One of the most important areas for autoimmune disease, if I talk from my clinical experience here more so, we're always coming back to the gut. Of course, Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut, very famously, and there is definitely some truth in that. The gut is where 70% of our immune system lives. So if we're trying to ask the question, why has an immune system started to attack the cells of that body, the gut is one place that we want to go and pay some attention to pretty quickly. Now, the way to describe this is that your gut is like a tube. And inside the tube, you've got food, which you're breaking down, and you've got lots of bacteria. About 100 trillion bacteria live in the gut. And we have that tube, and on the outside of the tube, so not within it, but outside that, you've got loads and loads and loads of immune cells that are there, and they're basically learning about what's in the gut. They're looking in and having a little nose at the bacteria and working them out. But they're also there so that if an immune response is needed, then they can go in and mop things up. Now, immediately, if we think about it, you've got 100 trillion bacteria there. And I do a lot of comprehensive stool testing where we delve into the gut and look at the different species. And I've never seen a perfect stool test showing me that there is a perfect balance of microorganisms. It just doesn't exist, to be perfectly honest. So if we think about that, pretty much everybody has an imbalanced microbial population in one way or another in their gut. And these microbes are really crucial in that their relationship with those immune cells is really important. So if those bacteria go out of balance, then the immune cells can start to go out of balance too. What we often find, though, in many people with autoimmune diseases is that it's not just that the bacteria are out of balance. Maybe the sort of strains there are very pro-inflammatory, for example. But what can also happen is that that gut barrier, that tube, can become leaky. Many people know this term, leaky gut, or more technically, we call it intestinal permeability. And if we go back to the start of the podcast, we spoke about the skin and that mucous membrane being a fairly tight barrier, not perfect, but a pretty good barrier. What that means in intestinal permeability or leaky gut is that that barrier has been compromised, and we've got the ability of substances within the tube to leak through that tube wall and therefore start causing problems with the immune system. If you think about it, food is there to be broken down into the most simple forms that you can then absorb, i.e. the nutrients. So if you were to eat, I don't know, a black bean, you'd be breaking that down so that you can then extract, the individual amino acids, the carbohydrates, etc. What we don't want to do is absorb that structure when it hasn't been fully digested. It has to be in the single most form. To give a very quick analogy of this, if you think of starch, which we all know we find in vegetables like potato, starch is like 100 bricks of Lego. We can't absorb that until it's a single brick of Lego. If we were to absorb that when maybe there's 20 bricks of Lego stuck together and that goes into the blood, the immune system looks at that and goes, whoa, 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 you should not be here. You're something that we don't recognize. So the immune system starts attacking it. If you imagine that you've got intestinal permeability, you're constantly leaking tiny fragments of undigested food and bacteria, because we've got 100 trillion sat in that tube, leaking into the blood. And what does the immune system keep hearing? It keeps hearing, we need you, respond, respond. That chronically is going to end up with an immune system that is dysregulated, that is imbalanced. And that, unfortunately, is one of the most common sort of mechanisms through which I see people getting autoimmune disease. It's that intestinal permeability and bacterial imbalance that can drive it.
That's a really good description. And the intestine is only one cell deep, isn't it? So, it's quite, if we're putting a lot of rubbish in there and we're breaking it down, it is quite easy to get leaky gut. I know I've had it and I felt absolutely terrible with it. Chronic fatigue, chronic brain fog, and we'll come to a lot of the other symptoms that you can have for leaky gut. But I think it's really important to let our audience know how you can find out. What can you do? Where can you go to find out if you have leaky gut?
So, one of the first things we definitely always think about is taking a good case history. Certainly at CNM, we're always saying start with a good case history, because you'll get probably 80% of the information you need to determine what you think is going on from just a good 1 hour case history. If we then need to explore in more detail and get specific information about whether there is intestinal permeability, then the sort of go-to test for me would be a comprehensive stool test. Now, on a comprehensive stool test, some companies, this is private, by the way, you won't get this on the NHS. Some companies will have a marker on there, which is called zonulin, which is Zonulin. Zonulin is basically a substance that when we find it in the gut, it tells us that those cells are breaking apart, that there is a leaky process that's taking place. So zonulin should be 0, because that means that we don't have any permeability. I had a patient recently who had a zonulin of over 1,000, and she had 2 autoimmune diseases, endometriosis, depression. I mean, the list went on. And when we did the stool test, the lab actually rang me and said, this is the highest we've ever seen come through the company. So what's going on with the client? We're really interested to know what's going on. So, zonulin is a very good indicator as to whether there is leaky gut. This is, however, where, if you are suffering with an autoimmune disease, it is always advisable to see a practitioner, a naturopath or a nutritional therapist or a herbalist or whoever, somebody that can maybe do the testing for you and understand what those results mean, but also really put a plan together for you that will focus on the root cause. Because it's so easy to just manage symptoms. And I know, Philly, you talk about this as well in terms of just suppressing symptoms. This is unfortunately what we see so much in conventional medicine, this idea that we just should suppress symptoms and manage disease rather than actually try and treat from the root cause. And so when you're trying to treat an autoimmune condition, the intention from a naturopathic perspective is not just to sort of get you feeling a little bit better so you can go and take the dog out for a walk in less pain, but it's to actually really get you to a place where we can get that condition into complete remission. And that's what I have seen with my own patients so many times. And I just, can't scream out loudly enough that there is so much that can be done for autoimmune conditions with naturopathic medicine if you focus on the root cause. So you do need to make sure that, that case history is all about finding out the answer to that question, which is why.
Absolutely. That's the Sherlock Holmes of medicine. You're actually investigating and seeing what's going on. But you said there that you can only have this stool test done privately, which I find so shocking when we know that so much of our immune system is in the gut. We know how important it is. And you can't go to your GP and have a stools test. They might test you for a parasite, but, that's kind of it. And my sister died a few years ago of motor neurons disease. And I was right at the beginning of my journey, but I kept saying, why don't you get a stools test and see what's going on in your gut? And everybody just laughed at me. And, I saw her doctors once, and they just laughed at me as if I was completely barking mad. Why don't doctors test the stools? They must know this information.
Sadly, they don't. And I think this is a much bigger issue than them. And it's, probably delving into your Dr. Malhotra podcast here, because it's a much bigger issue that comes down from a lot higher up the chain. Obviously, you know what you're taught. And in medical school, the training around stool testing and understanding this relationship between the immune system and the gut and so on, it's not the way that they are taught. It goes completely against the philosophy. If you think about it, if you have endometriosis, you go to a gynecologist, but the moment you mention bowel symptoms, they ship you off to a gastroenterologist. And the moment you mention something else, you go to a different specialist. So that on its own tells you that we're not viewing people in conventional medicine as a whole. We're viewing them as isolated systems that do nothing together, which is so far away from what actually happens. It's quite scary. So unfortunately, it's a much bigger issue with the sort of philosophy and with the training, which is a real shame. And don't get me wrong, conventional medicine absolutely saves lives, and I'm a huge advocate of it in acute situations. But for chronic disease, the truth is it's failing people. And that's why people are coming to CNM, people like me as a practitioner listening to your podcast, Philly, because they are damn fed up and frustrated that they're not getting the answers. And what you did there, and so sorry to hear that about your sister. You were asking the right questions of trying to understand, well, is there anything else that might be contributing to this that maybe we could do to make this situation any better? So, it's really important that we do things like this because people will understand that it is a much bigger issue. And, I've been there at the start of my training. I found a lot of frustration with doctors, especially when I tried to build relationships. And in the end, if I'm honest, just gave up. But then after a long time, I really realized that it's not really their fault. It's simply the fact that their training is very flawed when it comes to this sort of approach and philosophy.
Sadly, that's the case. When I started my healing journey, I didn't see my GP for 2 years, and then I went back in, and I was very, very ill. I hadn't got out of bed for 2 years, and he nearly fell off his chair and just said, "What have you done?" And I said, "I told you I was going to go and heal myself." But it takes hours and hours on the internet, and it's a bit of a jungle out there, and you don't know what's true. And you know, it's just like everybody talks about diet, and you've got the carnivore, you've got the vegan, you've got vegetarian, you've got pescatarian. It's a minefield. And so what would you say to anybody about that? Where should they look on diet?
Yeah, so to be honest, one of the best things I could probably say is actually come and do one of our very short courses or mini courses even on dietary models, because there is a lot of conflicting information out there. There's so much conflicting information, and patients come into me and they just say, I don't know what to do. You know, I've read this somewhere else, this contradicts it. I don't know what to do. So it might be the easiest way. We do have some short courses available on this, some of which very short. And that may be the easiest way to getting some information. Funnily enough, actually, we did put together something called the CNM Naturopathic Diet, which is sort of it's sort of a holistic naturopathic diet that focuses on really on the quality of food and getting in the fundamentals, and also gives some ways in which you could adapt your diet to suit you as an individual. So we're happy to share that with anybody. If anyone's interested, perhaps reach out to CNM on Instagram and they can, or email us, and we're happy to share the document with you. But yeah, if that helps.
We'll put that in the show notes because I think that's
Perfect.
really important, and everybody needs to be gaining as much information on their health as they possibly can at the moment. You know, there's a lot of talk that there might be another pandemic coming, and, you know, we have to arm ourselves now with this knowledge so that we're not fearful. And on that note, I just would like to ask you to explain what fear does to the immune system, because I think, you know, we're living in a world that, you know, for the last few years has been packed with fear, not only COVID, but, you know, the wars, everything that's going on. Talk us through what fear does to the immune system.
A lot. You know, fear, I think if we just go back to COVID for a second, I had never seen anything like it. The patients that I was seeing coming through my doors, it was coming back to the same things over and over. I saw it with my friends, with my family, as I have no doubt you saw exactly the same, Philly. The impact of fear can be pretty catastrophic, actually. If we think about what's going on in the body, when we are scared, we put our body into a fight or flight response, which basically means that our body's prepared for danger. It thinks there's a threat that's there. And so what that means is that our body prioritizes certain functions over other functions. You know, if we go back, a long time ago, this may have been somebody that was running away from, a wild animal. If you're running away from a wild animal, you wouldn't be worried about your immune system at that point. You wouldn't be worried about your gut at that point. Why would you worry about breaking down that, sweet potato you've just eaten? It makes no sense. So the body's always thinking, well, how can we shift the focus to certain systems based on whether we're calm and we're relaxed or whether we're in a fight or flight situation? So, if you're on your way to work and you see the bus and it's arriving at the bus stop and you've got 10 seconds to run and make it, that's a fight or flight. Your blood goes to your muscles, your heart rate goes up, we're ready to run and get there fast, and you'll get there, your pupils probably dilated, you'll be sweating. So if you think about that, if you are chronically in a state of fear, and that's the key thing here, we're not talking about little bursts of fear for most people. We're talking about a chronic state of fear. Every time you switch on the news, you get another spike of it. Every time you open your phone, you get another spike of it. The point is, chronic fear equals chronic stress, and chronic stress causes our immune system primarily to become compromised and weak. When we're stressed, we release a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol, not only does it suppress the immune system, but it also increases our blood sugar levels. And so what that means is that chronic stress or chronic fear could potentially even result in cells becoming resistant to insulin. And it might be a contributing factor to things like type 2 diabetes, or even polycystic ovarian syndrome, which I've seen as well. So what we're thinking about here is the fact that we are compromising the immune system for sure, and also the digestive system. If you think about it, if you're in a fight or flight situation, let's just say you're going to do a big public talk and you're a little bit anxious about it, you're probably going to spend a few trips there going to the loo because your body's in that fight or flight, and it's just sort of, let's just get everything out, we need to run away. You'll see it watching these animal shows on television. You see a zebra being chased by a lion and they empty their bowels because that means the body's lighter and it can run. So if you think about that chronically, you're basically putting the off switch on your gut, and that goes on and on and on and on, which means the implications of that could be anything from an abnormal immune system to constipation to fatigue because you're not digesting your food and absorbing the nutrients well enough, to bloating because you've got undigested food sat in your abdomen. The impact of this is huge, let alone going into the mental health side of things in terms of how that's going to impact somebody more emotionally. Low mood and depression, anxiety. I have never seen so much health anxiety in my entire life as I have since 2020. There is actually a batch flower remedy, which I love recommending for known fears. And you can imagine this has been used a lot in my clinic, a lot in the last few years. And that's called Mimulus, a great remedy. And just, a few drops in water, drinking that through the day can really help to sort of just ease those fears that you have. So this is for people that know they have very known fears. They have a fear of COVID or a fear of whatever that might be. So yeah, health anxiety as a result has just become a major issue. But yeah, that's an answer to your question.
Yeah, and the brain is connected to the gut via the vagus nerve, so nobody's looking. The government stopped school meals during COVID, so there were lots of kids that weren't getting the food. But I love the fact you brought up the back remedies, and I have to say I was born and grew up in Brightwall cum Sotwell, just round the corner from Dr. Buck.
Oh, fantastic. So you're a real pro.
His house is still there, and I used to walk past it every day on my way to school as a little girl and pick the flowers on his patch outside. And I'm a big fan of back remedies. I use the rescue remedy a lot. But that one you just mentioned, tell us the name again. I haven't heard of that one.
It's Mimulus, Mimilus. I'm having to pretend to write it there. Yeah, Mimulus is a great one. I always do think, if I kind of go through my plans to patients, if I look at what I'm recommending, it tells you a lot about what's going on at that time. And probably the two batch flower remedies I've recommended more than any other over the last few years is Mimulus for sure. Probably around the same quantity as another one called white chestnut, which you probably have heard. Have you heard of white chestnut?
Yeah, I have.
Which is great for kind of people that have circulating thoughts. They're waking up in the night. They've got a million things going through their mind. It's such a good remedy. And, there's very few patients that I probably don't give a batch flower remedy to because, of course, as you said, that emotional side is something we can't ignore. And, it's a really important concept. In fact, in naturopathy, there is something called Herring's law of cure. And I won't go into this in too much detail, but it's basically one of the things we look at in terms of, are we actually inducing the cure? Are we treating the problem, or are we just managing symptoms? And one of the most important laws in Herring's law of cure is that the mind gets better before the body. And what that basically means is that when we see a patient come back in to see us, if somebody comes in and they say, yeah, joint symptoms are a bit better, but actually my mind is so much clearer and my anxiety's calmed down and I'm not so fearful of this, or I'm not so resentful of that, that's a really good sign that we're going in the right direction in terms of how we're treating. So that's always a good one.
I've never heard of that. Thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely fantastic. So I want to come on to some autoimmune diseases now, because as you said, there are, over 1,000 or something. I mean, they're a huge amount of autoimmune diseases. Let's run through some of the diseases, which a lot of people most probably won't realise are an autoimmune disease. Something like fibromyalgia. I can never say that. Fibromyalgia. You say it for me, Bobby.
Yeah, well, fibromyalgia is an interesting one because there are different schools of thought on this one. I work a lot with fibromyalgia, and if I'm honest, from my personal experience, I don't tend to see it much as an autoimmune disease, but that doesn't mean it isn't. And I know a lot of colleagues that do, that they see it more as an immune issue. I see it more as a neurological issue. But, fibromyalgia, there are different approaches to kind of looking at it and treating it. So I would say certainly the classic autoimmune diseases would be things like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, Hashimoto's disease of the thyroid, and Graves' disease in the thyroid. We could be looking at rheumatoid arthritis, a few different types of arthritis actually, psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, which you get if you've got psoriasis. There's a lot of autoimmune diseases, and there are a lot of diseases that now we're starting to go, oh, is there an autoimmune element to it? Or is it actually entirely autoimmune? So those are sort of the clear-cut ones that we know for sure are autoimmune, but there are a number that, we're unsure of. Lupus is another good example of a very sort of, clear-cut autoimmune disease. So they are so ridiculously common. I've got patients at the moment in their early teens with the likes of Crohn's disease, that's just completely wrecking their lives. These are really, really sort of quality of life impacting conditions for a lot of people. And although there is definitely a spectrum of symptom severity, I've got one of my patients at the moment who's 11 with Crohn's disease, who can barely go to school. And well, I say can barely go to school, couldn't barely go to school. And, we've been working together for 6 months, and the transformation is absolutely amazing. And he's doing really well. And all it has taken is for somebody to take a different sort of perspective and ask the right questions.
So talk us through what Crohn's disease is. As we're talking about that, let's take it further, and why do you think it comes up? How do you think you can get rid of it? Well, you know how to help it.
So Crohn's disease is a disease that affects the actually any part of the digestive system, from the mouth all the way to the anus, because this is a long tube. So people with Crohn's disease can get mouth ulcers. That's one of the most common symptoms, actually. But a lot of the time, it's the small intestine that's really significantly affected by Crohn's disease. In fact, my mum had Crohn's disease. This is one of the reasons that I got into naturopathic medicine. She had Crohn's disease when she was in her mid-20s and had an ileostomy, which is where they remove a large part of the bowel, and then the bowel comes through the abdomen, and she has a bag, now a permanent ileostomy she had. And I always thought to myself growing up, is that really the only solution? Was there anything else that could have been done? So it kind of made me very inquisitive, and, made me think and made me wonder whether there's much there that could be done. And of course, there absolutely is. So I do like working with these patients, because for me, it's also a bit personal.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You wanted to be a doctor, didn't you, when you were young?
I did. Yeah, I did. I, applied to medical school, and I had an interview at Cambridge, and it completely put me off. It was a 3-part interview, and the third interview was basically them going, right, here's an X-ray, tell me what the diagnosis is. And I thought, right, I'm literally just turned 17. I have no life experience at this point, and you're asking me to diagnose an X-ray. And the interview process just made me wonder, is this right for me? And at that point, my mom again was seeing an osteopath, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. I like how they sort of look at the whole body. So I don't really know how it happened, but I ended up going into that. I did my master's in osteopathy. And it was after doing that I still felt there was something missing. I was treating patients and I was getting them, much better. But then a lot of the patients that had the likes of rheumatoid arthritis, the symptoms were just coming back. And I was thinking, I feel like I'm working a bit sort of superficially here. I started teaching the human body, so anatomy, physiology, and pathology at CNM. And then I was like, oh my God, what's going on down the corridor? You know, what's all this about nutrition and naturopathy? So started studying, and that literally changed my life. I mean, it really did. That was my absolute calling. And it didn't take me long to sort of go, thanks, osteopathy, for your few years, but this is where I'm meant to be. I'm meant to be at CNM, and I'm meant to be helping people this way. So that's my story in a nutshell.
And we are very glad you took that story. You know, the world has too many doctors and it needs far more naturopaths and homeopaths and, you know, all the good things that can get to it. But I interrupted you, sorry, on Crohn's disease.
Don't worry, no.
We're going to come back to Crohn's disease and kind of finish off kind of what it is and what we can do for it.
Yeah, so it affects mostly the small intestine, and it sort of can actually cause inflammation of the entire wall of the gut, which is actually quite thick, including the muscle and the sort of immune layers. So it can actually cause these things called fistulas, where the bowel sort of folds over, as you see, as a tube, and the different sections of bowel can actually tunnel together, where it causes so much inflammation that it pretty much sort of burns a hole through the intestinal wall. So it can be really serious. In terms of what causes it, as with any autoimmune disease, there are common things we see, but ultimately it is a case of working out in that specific scenario what's going on. Definitely things like antibiotics are a major one, major antibiotics. A lot of people that have Crohn's have had a big history of antibiotic use. Also, a lot of people have had their tonsils removed, because the tonsils are your first line of defense as well. I tend to find that a lot of people have low vitamin D. Now, vitamin D helps to balance the immune system. So when your vitamin D is very low, it means your immune system is more likely to overreact, meaning get an autoimmune disease. A lot of people also have that sort of intestinal permeability we spoke about. They tend to have bacteria that are out of balance. And there are certain species of bacteria that we find in the gut that have been proven to have a strong association with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So basically what that means is that if we were to do a stool test, we are likely to see certain species pop up that can sort of, you know, cause inflammation. They can eat the mucus in your intestine. They can be problematic. But generally, just a poor diet, you know, people eating a really junk food, processed diet, with minimal color, so minimal vegetables, fruits. Things like gluten and dairy can be a real problem, because they really can be inflammatory, especially gluten, depending on how it's being sort of refined and processed. Even things like trauma, you know, emotional trauma, especially in cases where, you know, it's perhaps sort of childhood as well. There might have been something quite significant going on there. So those are the sorts of things that we'd be looking out for, at least. In terms of how you treat it, it all depends on what the cause is. But very often you're looking at balancing the gut microbiome. So, you know, those 100 trillion bacteria, we often need to bring them back into balance. I think you pretty much always will have to do that. Now, depending on how imbalanced that is, you may first need to remove some of the unwanted bacteria that are living there, or maybe even parasites, for example, or fungus. So we might use things like herbs to do that, which we call antimicrobial herbs. So, for example, even thyme, the culinary herb, is an antimicrobial herb. There are other herbs we use as well, things like barberry bark, which is where we get a little compound from called berberine, which some of your listeners may have heard of. Berberines have a lot of attention because it's been compared to metformin for its use in diabetes. So it helps with sort of insulin as well. But, you know, you could just use berberine on its own to remove some unwanted microbes. We would probably be looking at probiotics, so healthy bacterial strains. We may be looking at feeding it with a fuel source. Obviously, probiotics, they're quite transient in that if you have a probiotic as a capsule, you know, there is a question as to how much that's really going to impact the populations of bacteria. But if you add in what we call a prebiotic, which are basically fibers that will feed the healthy bacteria, that seems to be more beneficial.
A banana is a prebiotic. So if you eat a banana when you take your probiotic, but there are some wonderful other things that I'd like you to talk about, which is fermented food, sauerkraut, the importance of kimchi and all the lovely fermentations. Can you just talk us through what those do for the gut?
Yeah, absolutely. So, foods that you're talking about here, probiotic foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, for example, these have lots of live strains of bacteria in them. So these are natural probiotics. So these are great ways of introducing probiotics in a food form, and the body tends to respond very well to them. What I will say is that some people will try probiotic foods or probiotic supplements and they will react negatively, i.e., they will bloat. If that happens, that is not the fault of the food, it's the fault of the body. And I'm only saying that because I've just had a conversation with a patient a few days ago, and it was an interesting conversation because we were talking about their daughter who's 3 years old, and they had her on a very restricted diet, and they were blaming all the plant foods, going, well, every time she eats plant food, she bloats. And I was like, it's not the plant foods, it's your daughter's digestive system. So it's kind of fresh in my mind here. But this is a really key point, that it is all about the gut. So if somebody does bloat, that's a sign that there is an imbalance in the gut microbiome. So that's where I would recommend seeing somebody, because it's not going to be as simple as putting in some fermented foods in those cases. You may need to work up to that by first getting some sort of foundations in place.
And is that the same for something like IBS?
Yes, IBS, I have to be honest, is one of my most hated conditions. Not to be too strong on this one, but I'm not a big fan of IBS. The reason being that it is obviously a syndrome. It's just a collection of signs and symptoms. In other words, it isn't really anything specific. There are lots of causes of it. So what I don't like about it is just the fact that everybody gets labeled with IBS if you have a bit of diarrhea and you have an urgency to pass a bowel motion, and when you do, it gets better. That's IBS. That's what you've got. If you don't fit into any other category, that's your diagnosis. The thing is that a lot of IBS is what we call SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is an imbalance of bacteria in the small intestine. Or it might be a candida overgrowth, so a fungal overgrowth, or it could simply be that you don't have enough stomach acid and pancreatic enzymes, which are causing you lots of problems. Maybe because you're really stressed, so you're not focusing on supporting a healthy gut. So the IBS for me is one of those conditions where if somebody tells me they've got it, I go, that's fine, thanks, but let's find out what it actually is. What is it that you're actually dealing with here? And again, that's always coming back to that question of why have you got the symptoms that you've got?
I find this absolutely fascinating talking to you, Bobby, but I know we're nearly out of time, and I want to cover, really importantly for me, CNM, because, as this world progresses and, we need more carers in the world, more intelligent people in the world that can help these body systems to recover, because they have been pretty much trashed by our environment and everything around us and everything we've been put through. So tell us a little bit about your courses at CNM, what people can learn with you, how they can sign up with you.
Sure. So the College of Naturopathic Medicine, or CNM, as everybody knows it. So we're the largest training provider in the UK and Ireland for natural therapy. So, our courses include everything from nutritional therapy to herbal medicine, acupuncture, homeopathy, health coaching. We have a number of practitioner diploma courses, so that's many of those I just mentioned. We do also have a degree, a Bachelor's of Science honours degree in nutritional therapy, which is 3 years full-time, 4.5 years part-time, or if you've done the diploma, you can do it in 18 months. So we offer a degree program now. The courses that we offer are very practical courses. You know, if I think back to school or even university, if I'm completely honest, it was very theoretical. It was very much based on, you know, you learn something, but you don't really know if you're ever going to use it again. I mean, I think we can all relate to that. And that was definitely something I related to. So one of the things that is really interesting about CNM is that its sort of slogan is training successful practitioners. And what that really emphasizes is that we're not training people that know just theory, but people that actually can help patients, like I've obviously been describing. So we're very much a college that focuses on practical application. So if we teach you theory, it's theory so that you can then apply it in a clinic setting. That's the crucial thing. Now, all of our courses are naturopathic in focus, which means that this philosophy that I've been talking about from the start today, you know, treating the individual, not managing symptoms, addressing the cause, etc., all of the courses have that underpinning philosophy. So it doesn't matter what course that you do, that's the underpinning philosophy. So yeah, that's a kind of a bit of an overview, a brief overview. If you're interested in getting in touch with us, then you can go to our website, which is www.naturopathy-uk.com, which I'm sure Philly will pop in the notes.
I will indeed.
You can message us on Instagram. Again, I'm sure this will be very obvious. And yeah, you can reach out to us if you're interested in studying with us. If there are any particular courses, then we've got people that can sort of have a chat with you and work out what may be best for you.
I've also got a discount code on my webpage, so you can use that and sign up there. And you do lectures as well. I've come along to some fabulous lectures there with Dr. John Gray, Patrick Holford. Both of them have been guests on my podcast, actually. I'm very good at going along and listening to people talk and going, will you come on my podcast, please? And they both said yes. But you do all these fantastic lectures as well, and there's a whole community at CNM, and you can do the courses online, can't you, as well?
Yes,
there are
yes.
different ways of doing it.
Exactly. We launched online in February 2019. So you can study online, you can study in colleges. We've actually got 10 colleges in the UK and Ireland. So we have a number of campuses if you'd rather study in person. So there's lots of ways that you can study with us.
That is fantastic. It's been a completely enlightening episode. I love talking to you, Bobby. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem. And keep up the great work, Philly. I mean, it's great that we've got people like yourself doing what you're doing. It's really important. So thank you for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, lovely. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. And join us next week. And we're going to keep getting this information out because it's too important not to have, because the doctor of your future is you. No offense, Bobby. But your body has got this. It knows exactly what it's doing with the right help. Thank you, everyone.